Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CoculesNation. My name is Secret Agent Nick Cocules. I'm the founder and the director of the Cocules Industry Spy Network and the CoculesNation. If you are someone who likes to use an animated avatar to do your streaming instead of a regular face cam, called a Vtuber or a V-streamer, depending on what you do, and you would like to get into using GNU Linux operating systems and free Libre open source software, this video will be for you. Now, I am not the one who originated this idea. You can thank a fellow VTuber named Rogue Ren for this. He exclusively uses as much free and open source software, including a GNU Linux operating system. In his streaming work, you can see pretty much all the things he has. That said, if you want to get started, the first thing you need to do is find an operating system that will fit your needs. I have an Ubuntu base, I'll probably need to get another one here shortly, a Fedora base, and many Arch-based operating systems you could take a look at. If you know computers, you would want to go for an Arch base. Otherwise, just stick with the Ubuntu base, Debian base, or Fedora base that I have lined up. Let's start with the Ubuntu base, and that will be Linux Mint. This is the most popular GNU Linux distribution in the world. It is very easy to set up, and I even have tutorials on how to set it up for security and gaming. The latest one I've done on this and audio production will be linked below. Now, you'll want to probably follow the one without audio production, as that one will be pretty close to how you do Linux Mint 22. With some slight differences, I may need to make a video on that sometime soon. But this is a good option. If you want a Debian base, you could go ahead and use Linux Mint Debian Edition or LMDE. This is the Debian-based version of the otherwise Ubuntu-based Linux Mint. So that is something to keep in mind. And there are a lot of different things you can do with it. Do note that it will come with Firefox by default, but you can easily use Chrome, which I don't recommend you do. Just use Firefox-based browsers, like, for example, LibreWolf. This is the browser I personally use a lot. There are things like Midori, which is based upon Florp. There is Pulse Browser too. You can even go ahead and use IceCat if you wanted to, though it'll be ESR-based. There's a lot of Firefox-based browsers, so you'll pick the right one to compartmentalize. I use different browsers for different purposes. That's what compartmentalization is. A technique popular by the likes of Rob Braxman. Now, I'm getting off topic. This is the Ubuntu base I would recommend, but I heard Pop was also good. I have a video on that linked below. Next will be the Fedora base, and that will be Nubara project. Fedora is a Red Hat based distribution for desktop use. Red Hat and its clones Alma and Rocky are more designed for a server-based installation, whereas Fedora is a general-purpose distribution. Nubara is designed for content creators and gamers and artists. So this is probably the best one you could do. There's a whole bunch of things you can do here as well. And there are a lot of fixes under the hood made by Thomas Kreider, who goes by the hilarious name of the Glorious Egg Roll. Kreider has made a ton of different fixes to make this as simple as possible to get gaming working on this specific fork of Fedora. And there is a lot of this. This is insanity, I know, but this may be your best option. Now, there are multiple Arch-based distributions that I have taken a look into. One of them is in fact Arco Linux. I have done a tutorial on this specific operating system to set that up for gaming. Again, that specific playlist will be linked below. But there are others you can use like Arco, like Endeavor OS. Endeavor is another Arch base, and it makes your experience with Arch extremely easy, though you still need to learn Arch eventually if you want to really customize your stuff. Now, there are a lot of Ubuntu-based, Debian-based, and even Fedora-based distributions that will allow this, but Endeavor or anything Arch-based is your best bet if you want quite the customization. I heard you can do this with Gentoo as well, but Gentoo requires compiling everything from the source code. That is insanity. Now, next off will be CachyOS. This one is also Arch-based, and it's really similar, right? It's basically the Nubar project for Arch-based distributions, and there is a wiki which you will need to utilize, and you'll need to use a lot of the different guides if you want to get certain things working with Cachy. So keep that in mind. Now that you have the operating system selected, you need a screen recorder. Well, the most versatile one is OBS Studio. In fact, this is the exact screen recorder I just so happen to be using at this very moment. This is the screen recorder that is the gold standard when it comes to broadcasting, live streaming, pre-recording videos, putting things on top like you see there, all that kind of stuff. It is really, really good stuff, I will say. This is probably going to be your only bet, unless you have like some sort of plugins that may be for Linux. I don't really know if there are many streaming related plugins that you can use, but you can certainly try. I'm sure there are some techniques that you can use from Rogue Ren. Now that you have that section done, you have OBS set up, but you need a video editor if you plan on doing pre-recorded videos. I have two video editors for this. The open source option will be Kdenlive. Now this is not the only open source option, but this I think is the most fully featured free software option. There are things like Shotcut and Cinderella. There's even Blender. You can use Blender as a video editor. Strange, I know, but there is that to consider. And there are quite a few different things you can do with Kdenlive. This is the one that I use a lot, though I've been having high CPU usage issues lately, so I need to get that sorted out. But hopefully I can get that fixed by the time this video releases. If you want a proprietary option that seems to be better than all the others, for, well, Linux use, that will be DaVinci Resolve. I heard this was supposed to be a good editor. This is what the professionals use. However, I will not be using DaVinci Resolve as I don't want to use proprietary software if there is an open source alternative like Kdenlive where I can personally know that the software I'm using will not be doing anything sneaky against my machine. Now that you have a video editor, you need some way to do thumbnails. Well, GIMP is probably the simplest option you can use. This is for raster-based photos, whereas Inkscape can be used for vector-based photos. These two, I believe, are alternatives to Photoshop, and I think InDesign or something along those lines. I'm not entirely sure. Whatever the Adobe thing is used for scalable vector graphics, I don't know what the flip that would be. But if you want to do actual art, you're going to have to ditch Clip Studio Paint. Unless it works on Linux, I wouldn't use it. Instead, Krita would be your best option. You're going to need to find yourself a line art set if you tend to do manga style art, because unfortunately, there is no free line art set designed for anime and manga, so you need to keep this in mind. However, you might be able to use a brush set made by renowned Krita artist David Revoy. Yes, he is one of the main artists that use Krita. I think this dude is Tyson Tan over here. This is the dude that was behind the art for the mascot here. And there's a whole butt ton of these as well. It is under GPL, most likely it'll be GPL 3, and it's been going on for a long time. It is a KDE product. KDE is the K desktop environment. They're the guys behind Plasma, which is a beautiful desktop environment, even though you need quite a bit of resources for that. I have 32 gigs of RAM, so I'm fine. You have the thumbnails sorted out. you have the video editor, you have the screen recorder, you have the operating system. Now you need a way to do a 3D and a 2D model. Now, if you want to do a 3D model sometime soon, you're going to have to use VSeeFace because there's something called Vtuber. Vtuber has been archived. It's basically on an indefinite hiatus as a result of the original developer of it having some personal stuff going on in his life to where he is unable to work on this project anymore. When it comes to VSeeFace, this is probably your best bet. Now, I heard this was supposed to be fantastic, and a lot of people, I think, would use VSeeFace for their 3D models. Ren has been known to use VSeeFace and Vtuber, but right now he's using VSeeFace. If you have a 2D model, you want to find someone who is familiar with Enochi 2D. Enochi 2D is pretty much the only competitor to Live 2D Cubism. Now, Live 2D has a subscription model, and you are very limited. The subscription model is absolutely predatory in my opinion. So, you need to basically be using this specific software. If you know someone who happened to be into Enochi 2D, who happens to use it a lot, especially professionally because you get all the features of Live 2D for free, request someone use Enochi 2D and spread the word about it. Especially since the developer is actually trying to get this funded. I don't know, however, how that is going right now. Luna Wolf VT is the person responsible for it, and I know they have been going through a rough patch as of late. Now that you have the 2D and or 3D model, you have everything set up, you've seen all the tutorials for it, now you need a place for your community. If you do not want to use Discord, I will personally recommend you not use Discord, because Discord is a good way to have yourself a lot of material that can be used against you, and you can also be doxxed very easily despite how careful you may be with what you say, if you practice good OPSEC, which I still need to work on. For that, I have two recommendations for this. One of them is Nerimity. Nerimity is a Discord clone, which is made by SuperKitten, but realistically, this is combining features of Discord, Revolt, and also Guilded. For a long time, as OG viewers would know, I had a Revolt server and a Revolt account. Due to some personal things that have happened to me, I have decided to delete my Revolt account and Revolt servers altogether. So this is something to keep in mind. But I did have a Revolt server, which again, is no longer active. So Nerimity has become my new home for the CoculesNation core server, which will be linked below. Another idea I had was to use a Matrix client. This is Element, the most well-known. It is made by the creators of the Matrix protocol. This is a federated protocol and has multiple servers. One thing to keep in mind, however, there are some servers you don't want to use, and matrix.org is one of the servers you definitely do not want to be using. I am using NitroChan, but I'm sure there are some others. I think you want to take a look at an article by Tatsumoto Ren, which will be linked below for the Matrix home servers that you will want to take a look into. And that said, I believe we are actually done with the basic setup requirements if you want to do virtual YouTubing and virtual streaming on a GNU Linux operating system. One thing to keep in mind, there are some other apps that I will be mentioning, like for example, Lutris. Lutris is designed with game preservation in mind. This is a launcher and it has some other unique features. Lutris.net is the site you'll want to go to if you want to take a look into this absolutely fantastic game launcher. Now, if you want to get gaming set up on Linux Mint or any other system, I do have tutorials for that linked below. Now, of course you have Steam. There is a native client for Steam. I think there's a lot of things you can do with that. If you are on an Arch-based distribution, keep in mind there are two versions, a native client and a runtime client. only use the runtime client if you have problems with a certain Windows thing when it comes to Steam. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, Steam is fantastic. I do use Steam a lot because there are some games I play that do require Steam. There are some other games I could do as well that don't require Steam, like many open source games, which I do have a whole bunch of them. Yeah, that said, that's something to keep in mind. Now, if you want to get into music production, some proprietary options are Reaper and Bitwig, as they both have native Linux clients. I know of someone who's looking to become a VTuber that uses Reaper. I heard it's pretty good, but let's be real. I personally use Audacity for that type of work, which is voiceover and voice acting. This is something I would personally use over Reaper. Or, if I actually have the time to use it like this, Ardor. Otherwise, if you want to do voiceover work using a free and open source DAW, with some exceptions, one of these exceptions is Ardor. For pre-built binaries, you need to pay for the pre-built binaries, which GPL does allow for. GPL is the most well-known free software license. If you want to learn about free software philosophy, go ahead and look it up yourself. I have, I think, mentioned this many times on the channel. This is a fully featured DAW or digital audio workstation. This is the one you could consider using, and many distributions will actually have this already packaged and ready to go. Now you can use Jack, but if you get a newer distro nowadays, you will be using Pipewire. And that's what I have. I have Pipewire set up on this machine. I need to learn how to optimize it because I could just use Pulse Audio if I wanted to. I may have to use Pulse Audio soon, but who knows? We'll see how time treats me. The next thing to consider will be really the browser you use. I've mentioned quite a few of them. If you want a Chromium-based browser, one that I happen to use is called the Brave browser. A lot of people have heard about Brave browser, and this is the one I use to watch YouTube on a web browser on the actual YouTube site. Now, that said, that I believe will be it for this video. Thank you, and good night.